Okay, so here's something really, really interesting about the Princeton, and I'm going to come at you with some riddles. Right. I don't know if I'm really going to do that. Okay, what does it say up here? It says 230 EU. Okay, that's a bit of a hint. At the back here, made in Mexico. Well, maybe it is, I don't know, can you see that? There, now you can see it. So it's made in Mexico, and it says 230 EU. So when they built this amp, it was an export model. Now, the problems I was having with this amp, which featured in a previous video about biasing, and yes, I did have to bias it. After I did the biasing, I started to notice some other crackles that I didn't like. So, first of all, this is not part of the original setup. This is my safety. It drains the capacitors so that I can go in here and touch, and I won't get a shock from residual DC being held by these big blue capacitor things. Okay, so back to the EU-Mexico mystery. So I was in and out of the amp, and I've cleaned all the sockets and that, and I got over here to the rectifier, and I noticed this. This came from the factory, so the wire was just connected, but not quite connected. So that will definitely cause some crackling. Now, similar with a yellow wire over here, it was a really, really bad solder joint. Now, okay, now comes the difficult part, and you need to let me explain a little bit because it all comes down to being made in Mexico. Shock, horror, you can't say that about Mexican workers. You're a terrible person. I'm not going there. What I'm saying is, look at this. 230 EU, right? So it's a 230 volt model and it's going to the EU. What is it about the EU that's different to North America when it comes to amplifier production? And I will tell you, lead-free solder, okay? When you're using lead-free solder, you need a hotter gun. You may need to, or a pencil, if you want to call it that. When you're using lead-free solder, you need extra heat and you need extra time. You need to make sure that the solder beds in, sits nicely, wicks into the wire. In this case, it did not. And at least two occasions over, here. And what is it about these things in particular? You've got very big globs of solder there. Whenever you're working with lead-free and you've got big globs, lead-free solder cools really quickly. It can go kind of... it can congeal a little bit too fast and then it becomes brittle. So what I like to do when using lead-free is to let the heat sit on it for a while and make sure that it has really taken. Now, why did this happen, I think? It's because whoever normally works in the Mexican factory here will just be doing North American models. And for those, you need to just, you can use lead solder in North America as far as I know. So when doing these types of joints, and they would all be identical. The only thing that's going to be different about a 230 model is this power transformer here. Everything else is going to be the same. So whoever did this, just, they had to use the EU methods, and I guess whoever did it just wasn't quite up to speed on using, this is a relatively new thing, this lead-free solder. So that's another thing about amplifiers. It's another thing. This is why you pay someone to work with amps who knows what they're doing, and that's me.